and welcome to this video. It is Monday evening, Monday the 6th of February. I've just got out of work, but I am actually off work the entire rest of the week. I had some leave days left to use up before the end of this year, so I have this week off, and coincidentally it is also a readathon this week. It is the week of Polarthon. Polarthon is a readathon run by Jade over at JD Reads. I will link her channel down below. Please go and check her out, she is wonderful. And I particularly enjoy this readathon because I'm a big fantasy reader, as you probably know already if you've watched any of my videos before, and this readathon focuses on a particular subgenre of fantasy being polar fantasy, so anything that is wintry, cold, Arctic inspired settings or magic systems or anything like that. I really enjoy this, and I'm a seasonal reader, so it makes sense in February to be reading wintry books. So I'm really looking forward to this. For this particular readathon, Jade has created a series of prompts. There's a wheel that you can spin and just pick as many from there as you want to. So I will be doing that shortly and probably will voice over what I get and which books I decide to pick for those prompts. And I, of course, will be filming the whole thing. This will be a week-long video. And I'm really looking forward to it, to having a week off work where I'm actually not going away for once and can just focus on having nice days out and just doing lots of reading. So this should be really fun. I have no idea how long the video will end up being, but it may be a slightly longer one, as hopefully I'll have lots of things to share about the books I'm reading and lots of adventures to film for you too. So without further ado, let's pick our prompts and then let's get reading. So spinning the wheel for the first of my 5 prompt selections, and we have got Cold Cover. And for this, I think I want to pick Dead Voices by Catherine Arden, which I'm pretty sure has a snowy scene on the cover. Next up, we have straight up polar fantasy. So for this one, I want to pick The Coward by Stephen Arion, which I've heard is polar and I've actually been saving to read for this readathon, and I'm very excited about. Next, we have Foiled Cover, and I know this one as well. I want to read A Storm of Ice and Stars by Lisa Ludek. I don't have it physically, but I know the physical book is very, very shiny. Fourth prompt, we have Watery, and I think for this one I can make Wolfbane by Michelle Paver fit because I'm pretty sure most of that's set at sea. And then fifth and final prompt is another polar fantasy, which I will decide throughout the week. Hello, so it is now Tuesday morning, the start of my few days off work and my first full day of Polarthon. And I have reading progress to report already. So last night I started the audiobook of Dead Voices by Catherine Arden, and I'm already nearly halfway through this. It's proving to be a very, very quick read, as I thought it probably would be. That's why I wanted to start with one of my shorter books. It is a middle grade, of course. It's shorter in terms of its page count, although I'm, as I say, listening to it on the audiobook, and I'm managing to listen to it on double speed, which is fairly standard for me. Depends on the narrator, but this one is perfectly fine to listen to. I probably could listen to it faster, but I find the voice gets a little distorted above 2 speed. Anyway, so in terms of the story, I'm really loving this so far for all of the reasons that I enjoyed Small Spaces, the first one in the series. This one is obviously a wintry setting rather than the Halloween vibes, but it's definitely got that same creepy sort of underlying, not really sure what's going on, that sort of unsettling feeling, which I imagine is what people really like about horror books. I don't personally really read any horror, but this definitely has what I imagine is the draw for that kind of book. And I love the group of friends in this book as well, the trio of main characters, and we actually see a little bit more from the others' perspectives rather than it just being solely Ollie's story in this one, which I'm really enjoying too. And it's just so atmospheric. I think that's the main thing I'm loving. It's a really atmospheric book and something which I am thoroughly invested in now. I really want to know what the mystery is and how it ends up. I have a couple of ideas. I'm not sure whether I will end up being proved right, but we will see. I will not probably be able to do any more reading of this until this evening now, though, because I am just heading out. A couple of my friends from my tennis club, actually, and myself are heading out to a local garden, just kind of for a look round there, and actually for a talk, I think, there as well. My friend invited me, I'm just going along, but it sounds fun. I used to go to this particular garden quite a lot when I was around university, but I haven't been for years, and it will be lovely to go and see a few of the first signs of spring coming out and spend some time with my friends too. We are also going for lunch afterwards, which I imagine will turn into an all-afternoon job. So reading will recommence this evening, and I'm sure I'll check in with you later on and let you know my final thoughts on this book, because I fully anticipate finishing it this evening. So without further ado, enjoy some garden B-roll, I assume, and I will see you again a bit later. so it's now much later in the day, and forgive the dodgy lighting, I'm sat in front of a lamp, so different background though. Maybe I should film on the stairs more often. Anyway, so I've had a lovely day out with my friends at the garden and out for dinner. We've had a really, really fun day, but I was quite laid back. But I have managed to finish in the couple of hours since I've returned. I managed to get to the end of Dead Voices audiobook, and I've really, really enjoyed this. It was a very solid start to the readathon, a very good middle grade all round. I think it's everything that I would want out of this kind of book. It's a solid 4 stars, 4 out of 5. I don't tend to give middle grade books higher than a 4 star. I just always find that compared to the other sort of books that I read, there's just always that kind of depth lacking. But in terms of what it was supposed to do, it absolutely did deliver. I think I probably slightly preferred the first one in the series just because I liked the setting of that one better. But this was wonderfully atmospheric and creepy. It was everything that it should have been, really, for this kind of wintry, abandoned ski lodge type vibes. It was really, really good. And I did kind of guess the twist at the end, but I liked the way it was done, and I think it sets us up very well for the rest of the books in the series, which I will most definitely be reading. I think this is a quartet, so there are 2 more to come, and I'm intrigued to see where Catherine Arden sets them and what direction she takes our characters and the plot in. So, as I said, a very solid start to the readathon, and I'll be picking up a new book tomorrow morning. So I am actually off to meet a friend today. We are having a day in Tewkesbury, which I've actually never been to before, but I hear is quite a pretty old town and has got some independent bookshops and a market and a nice abbey and things. So it should be a good location for us to meet up and chat. Fortunately, my friend is also bookish, so today will involve some reading time. We usually make a chunk of time during the day to sit and read our books, so I will be doing that at some point. And the book which I have with me today is one which I actually only started this morning, so I've only read like 2 chapters of so far, and that is Wolfbane by Michelle Paver. Now, this book is the 9th in a middle grade series by Michelle Paver, who I have loved every single book from so far. I didn't read these books as a child. I have only read them in probably the past 5 or 6 years, and have thoroughly enjoyed every single one of them. And I will give you a little bit more insight into the story in a little bit. But for now, let's get on our way, and I will chat to you a bit later. So as I said, this is the 9th and final book in this book series, and we are set in this series in a world, I think it's kind of the Dark Ages, but it's very ancient history anyway. The whole series is called The Chronicles of Ancient Darkness, and it's loosely set in kind of Northern Europe, but obviously there are no countries at this time. It's basically a huge forest and other very natural environments, and its society who inhabit it are clan-based society, and they live very much in harmony with nature and with the other creatures who live there in this forest as well. And in the first book we follow our main character Torak, who lives with his father, actually not in one of these clans, but very much out on their own in the forest, and the 2 of them survive together and get along absolutely fine until tragedy strikes one day, and Torak's father is actually killed by this demon-possessed bear in the forest, leaving Torak to fend for himself. He does, however, fairly quickly encounter what will become our other main character in this series, which is a wolf cub who is also out on his own in the forest, and the 2 of them kind of bond together, and Wolf becomes very much a protagonist of the series as well. He's so much more than just kind of a pet or an animal companion. He has a voice in this, he doesn't talk, but he has his own voice in this story, and we get certain chapters from Wolf's perspective, which I absolutely love, and it's a bit of a different take on the animal companion, which we usually see in middle grade books. And the stories basically just follow Torak and Wolf navigating this landscape, encountering lots of the other clans. They go to other landscapes beside the forest, so we've got some wintry kind of snowy mountain settings and Arctic plains and things. We have islands in the sea as well, lots of different nature, and I really, really love the world. It's a big part of these books that I particularly enjoy. This being the final book, I'm kind of scared about, because I always hate when long-running series that I'm quite invested in come to a close, just in case I don't like the ending and that negatively impacts the way I view the whole series from this point on. But I really hope that's not the case, and I'm only 2 chapters in, as I said, but I'm really enjoying it so far, and I'm intrigued to see how this story goes. So this will be my read for today, but for now I will head off into Tewkesbury and meet my friend and hopefully have a lovely day in the sunshine. We began the day with a lovely walk alongside the river, enjoying the sunshine, as we knew it was supposed to rain later on, and of course made time for a little reading break as well. Who could resist? It's such a beautiful spot to sit. We then made our way into Tewkesbury via the Old Town route, looking at all of the beautiful old buildings. It was such a gorgeous start to the morning, and I really love this old type of architecture, so we really enjoyed that. We also explored around the Abbey. This is such a beautiful building and gorgeous grounds as well. We saw some of the first signs of spring appearing, the blossom on the trees and the crocuses and snowdrops in the garden around there as well. I didn't get a picture, but we also met a really cute dog outside the Abbey. And it was such a beautiful morning to be wandering around, enjoying the scenery, and obviously catching up with my friend as well. I hadn't seen her for a few months, so we had lots and lots to talk about and just had a thoroughly lovely day. We then headed into the Abbey, which I was really amazed with, considering this was free. You could just wander in and spend as long there as you wanted. I've been in big churches like this before, which have charged an awful lot more for admission, and I always love looking around the beautiful historic architecture. The stained glass windows are always a favourite of mine, and I really like the ceilings in this particular place too. I'm a big fan of history, as you may well have picked up on in previous vlogs and places I've been to, so I like visiting historic buildings like this. And as I say, this was a particularly impressive one. I loved some of the architecture and the statues and just the general ancient feel to the whole place. It had been there, I think, since 1200s or something. It was a really ancient place, and I kept being put in mind actually of the cathedral in Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett, which I read a few years ago and absolutely loved. After the Abbey, we headed back out into the Old Town with the goal of seeking out some bookshops. I knew that Tewkesbury had several really good old second-hand bookshops, and we were definitely not disappointed by these. We found some real gems, especially this particular one, which was set along one of the little alleyways with just heaps and heaps of books on both sides. You could barely squeeze through. It was absolutely fantastic. I found a very impressive collection of Agatha Christie's, which I thoroughly approved of, as well as some gorgeous old special edition books and things. I could honestly have spent all day in there, and we did spend quite a long time in there, but some of these bookshops closed a little early, so we finished our bookshop tour with the one modern bookshop in Tewkesbury and perused a lot of the new releases and just basically sheltered from the rain until our dinner reservation later on. I absolutely adore book shopping, as I'm sure you know, and my friend thankfully is also bookish, so was quite happy to spend many hours with me in bookshops. I was trying to find some books which I could plan to read in the future, as well as a few things that had been recommended, and I think I was successful. I did pick up a couple of books, mainly from the second-hand bookshops, which I will show you, I am sure, once I get back home. This being one of them, The Seeker by S.G. MacLean. I didn't pick up this one, but I do think it is a book and indeed a series which I could be really interested in. But I will be honest, it was the mushrooms on the cover that drew me in. I also picked up a copy of The Binding, which I read prior to the end of this year and really enjoyed that one. And I was drawn in by this edition of Cloud Cuckoo Land because I'm really intrigued to read this one. I've heard it compared to Cloud Atlas, which I loved, so hopefully we'll get to that. We then went out for dinner and found the most beautiful corner of the restaurant. As you can see, I was very happy. It was very much my aesthetic. I loved sitting here, and we did squeeze in a little bit of reading time as well while waiting for our food. I was thoroughly enjoying Wolfbane and was very keen to actually sit down and read it, but not appear antisocial. But as I said, thankfully my friend is also bookish, so she was more than happy to get her book out as well, and we just sat in companionable silence for half an hour while we waited for our food to arrive. We had some delicious Mexican food. We had this tapas starter to share, and then I had a kind of superfood bowl which was absolutely delicious. I then headed home and finished off the day with a cup of tea. Had a quick look through the books that I had purchased throughout the day, generally lots of historical fiction, all of which I'm really excited to get to, and I absolutely love the cover of that first book. And finally settled down to hopefully finish off the rest of my book. Hello, it is now Thursday morning and I'm just checking in to update you that last night I did manage to finish Wolfbane by Michelle Paver. I really loved this book. I don't want to give any spoilers for this book or for the ending of this book because it is the conclusion of the series, but it was satisfactory. I was not disappointed by it, as I feared I would be. So I'm really glad I've now finished this one, and it's a series I can tick off my currently reading series list because I have got quite a few at the moment on the go. It was such a beautiful story, as they always are. I love the characters, I love the setting, I absolutely love Wolf. And I couldn't see going through how they were going to make it a satisfying and mainly happy but slightly bittersweet, like they usually do, ending. But Michelle Paver came through and it was a really, really good one. So very, very good book, as I've said. Probably a 4 out of 5 star. Middle grades pretty much never get 5 stars for me, but it was a high 4 star and a very, very good read, and I'm so glad I have finally read it. So today we will be moving on to my third book of Polarthon. So I think today I'm going to start Storm of Ice and Stars. I think that's the shorter of my 2 audiobooks, and I'm kind of in the mood for that one. So this one is by Lisa Ludek. It is a prequel novel to A Shiver of Snow and Sky, I think it was called. They have really similar names, which I read for Polarthon maybe last year, maybe the year before, I can't remember, but that was a beautiful book, very classically polar fantasy, but I really enjoyed that one, and I listened to that one on audiobook as well, and I believe it's the same narrator, which bodes well. So we'll be starting that one today. I don't think it's a huge book. I think it's probably the 300-ish page mark, maybe 350, but it should be a book that I can get through a large chunk of today, particularly if I go for a walk later on, which I fully intend to do so. So that's the plan for the morning. I'm actually sitting doing a bit of crochet while I start that one this morning, and having a coffee, of course, and I will check in with you a bit later once I have something to update you on regarding this book.
Jammer Audiobooks presents A Storm of Ice and Stars by Lisa Ludeka, narrated by Billy Fulford Brown. No coward soul is mine. Emily Bronte. Chapter 1. Skane was a silent land. The ancient trees stood tall and still, whispering to one another now and then. The ground lay heavy with snow, enshrouding its secrets of a time gone by.
Hello again. So I am now already about a third of the way into A Storm of Ice and Stars, so I figured it was time to give you an update. It's really sunny at the moment, but it's not a particularly sunny day, so apologies if the lighting comes and goes in this clip. I'm about to head out on a walk to hopefully enjoy a bit of the sun and to read a bit more of the book, but like I said, wanted to check in with my initial thoughts before I go out. So this book is set in the same location on the island of Skane as A Shiver of... what's it called? A Shiver of Snow and Sky? These names are too similar, it's confusing. In fact, this book is actually a prequel to that one, which, as I said, I have read before. And in this book, our main character is Yana, and she is a little bit of an outcast from the village, really. It does follow some of the traditional beats of the story that you would get with a YA. I think this is YA. So Yana is a bit of an outcast. They in fact brand her as a witch in this society because she is not like most people there. She wants to spend all of her time out in the forest with the animals rather than being around other people in the village, which I absolutely relate to. I already like this character because that's very much me as well. And before the events of this story, about a year before, Yana actually very sadly lost her boyfriend. And in this past year has been kind of an outcast, even more so in that she's just run away to the forest to try and find herself again after this loss. But at the beginning of this story, we have a very ominous occurrence in that red lights appear in the sky above the village of Skane. Now, I'm picturing this kind of like the aurora, the northern lights, because they talk about different colours in the sky. They talk about green and blue and red tends to be a portent of something very bad happening. Usually it is the foretelling of a plague. So Yana is kind of confined within her village in the anticipation of this plague. They close off the village to outsiders, and on the very first night of this village being closed, a man is murdered, and of course all of the blame is put on Yana because she was seen outside, obviously wanting some freedom from this village that's now closing her off, and they might all get infected very soon. She wanted to be outside, but because this is deemed not normal by the society, she's the one who is branded the murderer of this man. And both her and her friend Enya, who is also kind of a wild spirit compared to the rest of them, are actually imprisoned and sentenced as murderers by this evil woman who just wants power in the village called Ragnar. And I won't give you any more of the plot so far, but that's about the point I'm up to. and we're waiting to see whether the girls are going to escape or going to be able to disappear off into the wilderness, or whether they'll have to face the consequences of this wrongful accusation of murder. This book so far is making me so angry. Like, the character of Ragnar I absolutely hate, and just the attitude in general of the village towards the girls, that just because they're different that means they're persecuted, and that they get called names and they get accused of things that they absolutely didn't do, with absolutely no proof, just because they need someone to blame. And I hate that so much. That makes me so angry. But it's really well written, and I'm really excited to see where the story goes when the girls presumably will run away to the forest and encounter all sorts of wild creatures and magic and everything else. I'm loving being back in this world. I really love the way that these are written. It's my favourite brand of kind of whimsical descriptive fantasy, which I always really enjoy, and the snowy setting as well, the very wintry isolated feel to this book makes it a perfect choice for Polarthon. So really enjoying this one so far, and I hope to read probably all of it today, but certainly a good chunk more on my walk in a moment. So I last night managed to finish a Storm of Ice and Stars. I keep getting the name wrong of this because it's so similar to the other book in the series. But anyway, Storm of Ice and Stars is now completed. I loved this until the ending, which is really frustrating because this was a 5-star until the end, and it's now a 4. And not because it was badly written, but I don't like sad endings to books, and this was really sad. I get that it kind of had to be to set up that, because this was a prequel to the other book, so I understand why it had to be, so that we got the storyline that we get in A Shiver of Snow and Sky, was that one called? But I don't like reading sad endings, and this was really tragic and awful, and the whole book was sad, to be honest, the undercurrent of sadness, but also beautifully written, and I love the world and the way that it's kind of that sort of whimsical folkloric fantasy, which I really like. Kind of dark in places too, but the perfect polar setting. It was absolutely spot on as a polar fantasy, this book. So I'm really glad to have read it and to have had the experience, but I really wish that the ending could have been a bit less sad, because I just don't ever enjoy reading sad endings. But there we go, a beautiful book, as I said, and it will be a 4-star, so it doesn't drop that much for the sad ending, but just on enjoyment factor, I couldn't give this a 5-star. But it was beautifully written, and I'm glad that I have now read more from this world. And I must have a look to see if there are any more Skane books by Lisa Ludek, because I really like the way that they're written, and I would definitely read more in this world and from this author. So I will have a look into that later. So today we will be starting yet another book. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to jump straight into The Coward by Stephen Arion, which is another audiobook polar fantasy, or whether to pick up a new book from the library today and try and read something physically today. Or maybe I'll just do both, I don't know, it depends. If they end up being not that similar books, then I'll probably read books alongside each other. But anyway, just wanted to wrap up the previous book before we move on to the next one, and I will let you know a little bit later on what I end up reading today. Hello, so I have just come out into town to run a couple of errands and also to go to the library because I needed to pick up one extra book for my final Polar Fantasy prompt for Polarthon this week, and even though I haven't yet read all of the other books that are allocated, I wanted to get hold of another physical book. So to the library I have been. I didn't know what I'd find there, I wasn't sure exactly how many polar options they would have, and to be quite honest, I'm not sure if the book that I have picked up is strictly Polar Fantasy, but I think it fits closely enough and I want to read it, so we're going with it. So the book I've picked up is this one. This is For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. I believe this is the first of at least 2 books. It might be a duology, I'm not sure, or it's just an incomplete series, but I'm really intrigued by this one. So it seems to have kind of folklore vibes, which is the main reason I picked it up, and the cover does look somewhat wintry, so we're going with the fact that it's polar, even though it's not. It's folkloric, as I said, and that is one of the large parts of the polar fantasy genre anyway. There's a lot of basis on like Slavic folklore and mythology and things like that, as well as the traditional like Arctic snowy settings. So I'm gonna go with it. If it doesn't quite fit, it doesn't really matter, but it's another book that I wanted to read anyway. So I've seen this in bookshops quite a lot, but I'd never got round to picking it up or looking into it very much, and I still don't know a huge amount about the story. We seem to be following 2 sisters, the youngest of which has to, I think, go out into the forest or to be a sacrifice or something, I think. Let's see. The first daughter is for the throne, the second daughter is for the wolf. As the only second daughter born in centuries, Red has one purpose, to be sacrificed to the wolf in the wood in order to save her kingdom. So yeah, it's a kind of sacrifice plot. One assumes that when she goes out to be this sacrifice, things do not quite go to plan, but I don't know which fairy tale this is based on as well, because you'd think the name Red and the cover that it would be Red Riding Hood inspired, but then being a sacrifice in the forest sounds a bit like Snow White to me. So, and then with her interacting with the wolf, which actually is a man apparently, a monster in human form rather than an actual wolf, that sounds a bit Beauty and the Beast like. So I really don't know, but it might be a mixture of all of them, which would be really cool. So I'm excited about this book, and I will actually start it today, I think. I'm needing another physical read, so I'll hopefully get to read a little bit of that one today, and we'll let you know my thoughts once I get started. it's now Sunday morning and I'm checking in before a very busy day in which I probably won't get much reading done, I'll be honest. But just to let you know that I am another book down for this challenge, for this readathon. I finished last night reading For the Wolf by Hannah Witten, and I have very complicated thoughts about this one, so I haven't really had time to sit down and kind of process them, so forgive me if this is a little rambly. First things first, I did really enjoy this book. I think this is probably a high 4 stars. I don't think it's quite a 5, but it certainly was something I really enjoyed. I always love anything that's folklore and fairy tale inspired, and this was very much the dark fairy tale vibes which I was hoping for, and I really loved that. It was very captivating, and I did find myself drawn to keep reading this book and to figure out what was going to happen. So a little bit about the story, as I now know a lot more and I'm able to summarise it better for you. So it did turn out to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I know I was speculating which fairy tales would end up being themes in this book, but it was largely Beauty and the Beast, which I was not mad about because that is one of my favourite fairy tales to read books based on. And it followed our main character, Red, who you see on the cover, who is a second daughter, and in this society, the second daughters of the crown are always sent as a sacrifice into the Wilderwood. In the historical times, 5 kings had been stolen away by this magical wood, and ever since then, second daughters have been sent as a sacrifice in the hope of reclaiming these kings, although to date this has not been successful. Red has a little bit of a different relationship with the wood in the fact that her and her sister, several years before this book is set, had actually attempted to go into the wood and bargain with it themselves, and things didn't go to plan, and Red ended up coming away with a little shard of the wood's power as her own. So she, of course, has a very different relationship than the previous second daughters had. But nevertheless, she has resigned herself to her fate and to going into the wood, both to save her kingdom and to actually save them from herself and this power of the wood, which she had taken on as her own. And into the wood she goes and meets the wolf, who is in fact not a wolf, as we said, but is a man, who also has a very close relationship to the wood and is trying to fight against the evil and all of the regular plot points you would expect in this kind of book. And of course we have a developing relationship between Red and the wolf. They start off very much not being very impressed with each other, but of course warm to each other, as you might expect. Not really a spoiler. We do also, for sections of this, follow Red's sister back in the castle and the escapades kind of politically that are going on at the time. We also have little bits of a story regarding a very ambitious priestess and that sort of thing, but to be honest, those bits of the story I found very much fillers. I was kind of bored by those bits. I really, really liked Red's story. It reminded me a lot, actually, of Uprooted by Naomi Novik, which I read last year and really enjoyed also. But I feel like the framework of Red's story and her and the wolf as characters really reminded me a lot of that book, as well as the kind of evil, sentient woodland. It was all very similar, but as I said, I really enjoyed both. The fact that I didn't like the bits with Red's sister as much, though, does make me think that I'm probably not going to pick up the sequel to this. It is a duology, I believe. And I think the second one is going to follow her sister's perspective more. And I just don't think I really want to read about that. I mean, it was left on a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of this book, so I am curious to know where the story goes. But I don't think if the format was reversed and it's mostly the sister and then only a little bit of Red, I think I'm going to be bored. So I may change my mind, but this one was definitely a win and I would read this again, but I don't feel massively compelled to carry on with the series. It didn't turn out to be particularly polar. I mean, the kingdom that they live in, because of the magic of the wood, ends up being cold all year and is pretty much always winter, even when it's not. So I guess you could count it as polar for that, but nevertheless, I really enjoyed this book and I'm glad that's another one off my list. So like I said, busy day today. I'm actually going to the theatre this afternoon, so I probably won't have a huge amount of time for reading, but I do want to hopefully start the audiobook for The Coward by Stephen Arion. I doubt I will get this all finished today, but nevertheless, I will make a start on a 5th book. It's still been a really productive week and I will let you know later on my wrap up for this week and my final thoughts on The Coward. Hello, so it is now actually Monday morning. Polarthon has technically finished, so I thought I'd better check in and wrap up my final reading progress for the week. So yesterday I did make a start with The Coward by Stephen Arion and have ended up reading, I think, about a third of this, so obviously didn't complete my 5th prompt for Polarthon, but I did give a good start, and this is a book that I know I'm going to really enjoy, so I'm glad that Polarthon has given me the kick to actually pick this one up, because it's something I'd heard about for a while and just have never got round to yet. So The Coward is very much my typical favourite high fantasy type of story. It's set in, you know, a fantasy world. It's that kind of medieval inspired culture with kings and battles and people going to taverns on the road and quests and all that sort of thing. It's very much my vibes of fantasy, and we commence with our main character Kel, who 10 years ago as a young man went on a very dangerous quest with a bunch of the country's heroes to try and fight off an evil ice lich, which is kind of some sort of spirit we are led to believe are a monster that lives in the far north in the frozen wastes. And Kel is actually the only one to come back from this quest, and it leaves him very scarred. Even though he's known as a hero, he is very damaged by the whole experience. And 10 years later, he is living a very quiet life, running a farm in the countryside, nothing grand whatsoever, trying to avoid people most of the time, to be honest, which relatable. But he receives a summons from the king saying there is a similar threat to the country as there was 10 years ago, and because of his experience on this previous quest, the king wants him to go and see what's going on in the north and fight off this new evil. So after a very reluctant start, Cal sets off on this quest, and on his journey acquires a bunch of companions, a very ragtag bunch, which again is one of my favourite things in fantasy books, of these unlikely characters all coming together and finding that they can work together and discovering things about themselves, and it's just a really fun time. So I'm really enjoying this so far. I'm listening to the audiobook, and I'm hoping actually to save the rest of this book for a trip I have planned in a few days' time, just up to the Lake District for a day again. I love going up there all the time, and I feel like this book, being about a quest and being in the outdoors and everything, is going to be perfect to listen to while I'm on a mountain walk. So if that ends up being in my next vlog, then I will be sure to include it and to let you know my thoughts on this book, but very promising start so far. So without further ado, I am going to wrap up this vlog here so I can actually get into work. So thank you very much for watching, as always, and thank you very much to Jade for hosting Polarthon once again. It's always one of my favourite readathons. I love that it prompts me to read more books in a week than I have done for a while. I have read 4.5 books this week, which I'm really pleased with, and also to read this specific type of book. I do love a polar fantasy, and I need to pick these up more often. So as I said, thank you very much for watching. Give me a like down below if you enjoyed it. Chat to me in the comments about any of the books I've read this week, anything else you'd like to discuss. Did you take part in Polarthon? Let me know how you did. And please consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content from me. It really means a lot and helps grow my channel too. I will see you very soon with the next video, so goodbye for now.